We're hearing that Russia launched multiple missiles and drones overnight again. This, according to Ukraine's Air Force. Let's check in with Joseph Lindsley and find out what's going on at the moment. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Bob. Good afternoon. Yeah, it was another night of alarms throughout the night. And, it really does. I think it becomes difficult for everyone to keep track of what day is what day. You think back to last October when once a week the Russians would strike, often on a Monday, to hit Ukrainian infrastructure. And that set the tone for your week. But now we have these attacks every single night. Drones and missiles. Odessa was hit once again. I'm tired. Everyone's extremely tired. Nevertheless, here today, this morning, I attended an event in Lviv. Lviv is such a curious city. It's a maze of old buildings, and within each building, it's a maze itself. It's centuries and centuries of architecture and of adding on to old palaces and old houses with Renaissance. You turn a corner and there's be a courtyard full of Renaissance statues and curiosities. It's kind of like a college campus in the city, all surrounded by this great pedestrian square. And today, in one of these hidden maze-like buildings, I attended an event in honor of a well-known Ukrainian Lviv art teacher. And she was retiring, and her students, young and old, through the past decades, going back to Soviet times, they brought flowers, and they were there for her retirement event. And, everyone is underslept and tired, but here in Lviv, you still see people caring about art and culture. There were young students, young girls presenting paintings that they had restored. And so they're trying to still preserve the past while also trying to preserve the very present so that there can be a future. And I've never seen anything like this, anywhere as I've traveled the world, how people keep living and keep insisting on having beauty in their lives amid these horrible stories. And as I heard from members of that frontline kitchen, which I mentioned yesterday, they've paused. They're still cooking, but a lot of them have gone down to the floods in Kherson. And one of them, a British volunteer, posted a video today on Twitter, and he said they have to take a break because there's so much shelling from the Russians as they try to rescue people. And they say now the rescue operations are suspended. They're waiting for the shelling to subside. And then their next mission, as soon as there's a break in the Russian attacks, if there is one, is to recover dead bodies as the water subsides. And it's absolutely horrible what's happened there. And then there's the ecological aspect and the coast of Odessa. I mean, I remember Odessa is such a nice seaside city, but the shore now is polluted with debris and oil and fertilizer, all kinds of things as a result of the Russians destroying that dam. The scientists say there's reports of salmonella and other horrible things in that what was a very pristine coast of Odessa, and so that catastrophe continues, and this has become now the Russians are. I mean, these attacks are happening every single day. Meanwhile, there are reports, but it's still tough to know. Ukrainians have progressed by anywhere between 100 meters to 500 meters. So very little progress, but steady progress. Everyone hopes in this counteroffensive.
I'll tell you, looking at those images of people dealing with the flooding, it just rips your heart out. But there is a report.
I mean, it's so sorry, Bob.
No, continue, please.
Go ahead. Well, I'm saying, I mean, that's every conversation I have with people, including people, especially people from that area. There was a girl, she's Crimean, from the Crimean Peninsula, and she had just been there on a program singing for soldiers, and all the places she visited are underwater. And it's really hard for people to believe this. I mean, everyone expects the worst from Russia, but just to see the sheer, I mean, I think that this is a huge catastrophe that's ongoing, and it's going to have many effects for many years.
There's a story today about a Ukrainian hotline for Russians who want to surrender, and according to the Wall Street Journal, this hotline has received more than 17,000 inquiries since September. Social media posts are showing draftees pleading for more equipment and their wives back home complaining that they are ill-equipped and under heavy bombardment at the front, despite being promised jobs in the rear. And even Putin acknowledged losing a significant number of tanks. So when you hear that, and that's front page Wall Street Journal today, does that give you a little bit of hope, Joseph?
Oh, absolutely. And there's a lot of hope. And there are reports even in Russian media that a major Russian general was killed by a Ukrainian strike in occupied Zaporizhia. And, then, what are these Russians fighting for? And Ukrainians, even when they have supply problems, they're fighting for their homeland. So they always have motivation. And so, yeah, there is a lot of hope that, I think Ukraine is still the best way to describe this right now. So, Ukraine remains a democracy, which is, I think, pretty astounding. But people are able to discuss, how the war can be fought in better ways. And today, in Ukrainian media, Hromadski, there was a very powerful story by a young woman, Maria Berlinska. She runs an NGO called Air Intelligence Support Center, and she's using her free speech to criticize some aspects of how the war is being conducted. And she says that mistakes have been made. And she says these words: heroism is always the result of someone's mistakes. There wasn't proper planning or something, and surely there were a lot of mistakes made since 2014. But month by month, Ukrainians are adapting and learning. But the one area where she said Ukraine, and there's a lot of people who really this story has resonated with today. She says Ukraine needs more drones because the Russians have. They have, huge numbers of equipment. They have, many more people than Ukraine does. And her concern, and I think it's echoed by many people, is that, Russia is just going to keep pounding Ukraine until there's no more Ukrainians left to fight. And Russia doesn't care about humanity. They don't care about their own people. That's why some Russians want to surrender. And so this plea from this very eloquent plea was that Ukraine, yes, they need these massive weapons from the West and tanks and especially fighter jets, but they need the very simple things, drones with thermal imagers, so that they can see where the enemy is. And the Russians are starting to use their drones now to try to destroy the very expensive equipment. But what I liked about this story is that it's an example of how, even in the wartime, there's free speech. You can write an article critical of the government, and people will have civilized debates about it because their only goal is to find victory. And to do that, you think of the images of Vladimir Putin, where he sits at that table and everyone else is, like 20 feet away from him.
Right. Or
when he speaks in the palace or in the Kremlin, he speaks in a ballroom and half of the ballroom is empty because he can't have anyone nearby him. It's a total opposite here. And so even as it's difficult, the best hope is the fact that everyone knows there's a possibility. As long as people keep communicating with each other, they can always be finding better solutions together.
The humanity of the Ukrainian people is just unbelievable. In that same story I was referring to a couple of minutes ago, there's the tale of a Russian soldier who found himself right underneath a Ukrainian drone that was kind of zeroing in on him. And the Russian soldier looked right at the drone and right at the camera in the drone, and he raised his hands in a plea for his life to say, "Stop, please, don't kill me." And apparently at the control center for the drone, the Ukrainian officials decided to spare the man's life. They ended up taking him prisoner, but they didn't fire from the drone. I mean, can you imagine the Russians doing that if it was a Ukrainian soldier? Story. Yeah.
Well, and Bob, it was difficult because Ukrainians, they had to use multiple drones to walk that Russian soldier to safety. And while he was going toward the Ukrainian line, his Russian colleagues were shooting at him. And so it took a lot. It wasn't, it was a difficult thing for the Ukrainians to pull off, but they believed he was sincere, and they took a chance on his humanity. And that's the difference. It's a question of humanity. And maybe this is, the more Russians can see, the reality, if they, can get beyond their filters, maybe there's a hope that they will wake up to this. And, we've talked about before, but there are many people working on breaking up the Russian Federation. We hear a lot of criticism from the Wagner leader of the Kremlin. So there is some hope. Maybe somehow something will break in Moscow.
Keep hope alive. Joseph Lindsley, the man who, according to all the WGN listeners who were on our Eastern Mediterranean cruise, is the star of our show. And we look forward to our talk tomorrow, Joseph. Stay safe.
Till tomorrow. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Что он сказал?
Well, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?